Hello, this is the 266th edition of Catch of the Day, available on the Branch Talk YouTube channel. Today we're going to continue reading from a book written by Trent Wildy entitled The King of Crisis in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Starting at the top of page 3, both of those innovations had been experimented with in South Africa and Australia before the 1901 session, and both of them had been developed in response to regional mission needs, and both were developed in opposition to General Conference pronouncements and procedures. Ellen White was overjoyed with the development of union conferences. In calling for reform on the first day of the 1901 session, she noted to the delegates that God has not put any kingly power in our ranks to control this or that branch of the work. The work has been greatly restricted by the efforts to control it in every line. If the work had not been so restricted by an impediment here and an impediment there, and on the other side an impediment, it would have gone forward in its majesty. At the 1903 session, she declared that it has been a necessity to organize union conferences, that the General Conference shall not exercise dictation over all the separate conferences. On the basis of those and other comments, the late Jerry Clodley had argued that the unions were created to act as firewalls between the General Conference and the conferences, making dictation impossible. He buttressed his firewall image with two major points. First, each union had its own constitution and bylaws, and was to be governed by its own constituency. And second, the officers of each union were to be elected by their own union constituency, and therefore could not be controlled, replaced, or disciplined by the GC. To put it bluntly as possible, Clodley wrote, after 1901, the General Conference could vote whatever it wanted unions and conferences to do or not do, but the unions and conferences were autonomous and could do what they believed would best advance the work of God in their fields. The GC Executive Committee or the General Conference in business session could vote to fire a union president or conference president, or vote to merge a union or conference with another one, but their role or their vote would change nothing. The union or conference would still exist, and the member delegates could elect whoever they wanted as president. The situation looked good in 1901 with the union conferences in place. But the push for both unity and uniformity by the General Conference over time would erode the accomplishments of 1901. Footnote at the bottom of page 3. 9. General Conference Bulletin 1901, 26. 10. E.G. White regarding work of General Conference, MS-26, April 3, 1903, italics supplied. 11. Jerry Clodley, who runs the church, understanding the unity, structure, and authority of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, NP, Advent Source, 2013-18, italics supplied. And going onward, temptation of the General Conference throughout its history has been to overstep the bounds of its authority. The unity in diversity idea had begun to run into major difficulties in 1902 when Daniels began to assert his authority as General Conference President in his struggle with Kellogg. At that point, diversity began to take a backseat to unity, and Ellen White, in 1903, had to warn the reforming General Conference President that he could not exercise kingly power over his brethren. In spite of Daniel's temptation to wrongly use the power of his office, the balance between unity and diversity, institutionalized by the creation of union conferences, fared tolerably well for most of the 20th century. In his summary of that period, Jerry Cudley notes that the constitutions and bylaws created and voted at the 1901 session for the first unions contained no requirement that the unions adopt or follow GC policies, procedures, programs, initiatives, etc. But that would begin to change in the legal documents of the denomination in the 1980s and come to a climax in the 1990 and the first 2 decades of the 21st century. The 1980s witnessed the development by the General Conference of a model union conference constitution and bylaws. In 1985, the working policy stated that the model should be followed as closely as possible, but by 1995 the same section would note that the model shall be followed by all union conferences. Those sections of the model bylaws that appear in bold print are essential to the unity of the church worldwide and shall be included in the bylaws as adopted by each union conference. Other sections of the model may be modified. In 1985, the model stipulated that all purposes and procedures of the unions would be in harmony with the working policies and procedures of the General Conference. By 1995, General Conference programs and initiatives had been added, and in 2000, all policies was included. All of the additions were in bold print. Thus, between 1985 and 2000, the working policy not only erased the 1901 model of unity in diversity set forth for the unions by Ellen White, they led a drive for decentralization, but had become progressively more engineered towards centralization of authority in a drive for unity with less and less diversity. Footnote number 13. E.G. White and Elder Daniels and his fellow workers, April 12, 1903. Footnote number 14. Cudley, who runs the church, 31. Number 15, Stanley E. Patterson, Kingly Power. Is it finding a place in the Adventist Church? Adventist Today, September, October 2012, page 5. Cudley, who runs the church, 32 to 33. Working Policy of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, 1999-2000 edition, Hagerstown, MD, Review and Herald, 2000, 125, 126. Take care.